to make rag quilt in queen size and a random style. Materials and equipments needed. Flannel fabrics. Quilt foam. Fabric scissor or cutter. Fabric clips or pins. Thread that matches the fabric. Rag scissor. Fabric marker. Ruler. Sewing machine. These are the steps. First step, cutting. Cut the fabric into 10 by 10 inches. Cut the quilt foam into 9 by 9 inches. Next step, make your design. Cut 392 blocks of fabrics and quilt foams to make 14 by 14 blocks. Lay your back fabric on the bed so you can arrange the way you want. Also, you can plan how big your quilt will be. Gather your blocks by rows, then label it by numbers. This will keep the arrangement. Place the quilt foam on the top of the fabric. Make sure to put it on the middle. Next, lay the front fabric on top of the batting. Secure the three together with fabric clips or pins. Put the fabric clips or pins away from the corner, because that is where your stitch line will be. Next step, marking the fabric and sewing. Mark a stitch line across the middle with a fabric marker. Before sewing, change your needle to a heavy-duty needle. Sew the fabric following the stitch line you made. Next step, connecting the blocks. To connect the blocks, it will be back fabrics together. Secure it with fabric clips or pins. Mark a stitch line 1 inch on the side. Sew and follow the mark you made. Next step, connecting all the rows. If you have this magnet guide, you can use this. Otherwise, you can put a tape on this side as your guide. In connecting the rows, you will sew 1 inch from the side. To have a perfect corners, connect the seams together, separate the folds in opposite direction. This will prevent bulkiness. Secure it with fabric clips or pins. Connect and sew all the rows of fabrics. Next step, making the binding. Measure all the sides of your quilt and add. The total will be the length of your fabric, and the width will be 2.5 inches. Next step will be connecting the strips. Connect the strips of fabrics by joining the two in a 90-degree angle. Lay the two fabrics right side together in a 90-degree angle. Secure the two together with all fabric clips or pins. Put your fabric clips or pins away from the corner. That is where you join the two fabrics together. Mark a 45-degree angle stitch line. Sew and follow the stitch line you made. Cut the excess fabrics 1/2 inch from the end. Fold the fabric into half and iron the fabric to make it flat. In the connection point of the fabrics, separate the two fabrics and iron. This will prevent bulkiness. Next step, attaching the binding. Line the raw edge of the binding and the quilt. Secure it with a fabric clips or pins. Note, start sewing at least 6 inches from the edge. This will allow you to have a room to join the binding together at the end. Next step, sewing. Sew the binding with the quilt. Check how I miter the corner. Before reaching the corner, ½ inch from the edge, exit in diagonal 45-degree angle. Fold the bias upward, then bring it down and line the raw edges of bias and the quilt. Sew from the corner all the way down. See how I connect the two edges of the bias. Before reaching the end of the bias, stop sewing and backtack. Overlap the two ends of the bias by 2½ inches, then cut. Join the two ends of the bias by joining the right sides together in a 90-degree angle. Secure it with fabric clips or pins. Mark a 45-degree diagonal stitch line, then sew. Next step, hand sew the other side of the bias with the quilt using a blind stitch. First, insert the needle in the batting, then insert the needle inside the bias. Alternately do this. Then after a couple of stitches, pull the thread to hide the thread and lock. Next step, miter the corner. To miter the corner, fold the fabric in the corner with a 45-degree angle fold. Then do a whip stitch. Next step, ragging the flannel. Cut the edges ½ inch from the stitch line using a ragging scissor. Otherwise you can use a fabric scissor if you don't have a ragging scissor. The final step is washing and drying. Wash your quilt in the washing machine and dry. Don't be surprised if you see a lot of thread in your dryer. It will become fewer and fewer fabric threads as you wash several times. I hope you learned from this video. Press subscribe, like and share to support my channel. Press the bell button to be notified with my upcoming videos. Thank you.